Hey, Friday again. Wow, incredible. Where did the week go? Well, we know where it went in my case because, we've already talked about that. I feel like I do that same intro every Friday. I do one of these as if I'm surprised that Friday is upon us. It's not really the case, is it? So, what's been going on today? Today was good. I alluded to it yesterday. Plenty to crack on with business-wise today for me. So, it was productive. I got through. There are two things that need to be done today. 2 emails. So there's nothing more than an email, but 2 fairly chunky emails need to go out. But the rest of the stuff is done. Lots of should do items on the list, which is interesting. So what I said to you yesterday, if you caught yesterday's video, it was must, should, could in relation to tasks or activities or actions. And I have a lot of shoulds, quite a few coulds, which is normal. But I'm interested in those shoulds because those are things that to me at least are important, but maybe weren't urgent today. And I think when I look at what's coming up next week, there's going to be a good opportunity to make a real dent in those activities. So I'm looking up at that whiteboard and it's a lot of should or could do stuff. Equally, there's a layer of I really do want to do these things. So even just glancing up at that, I've had a thought about something. So I'm glad it's there. Anyhow, today's been good. Very much a head down day. Went for a coffee with a friend in the afternoon, which was nice. But even that was it was a good conversation. So I think from my perspective, good day overall. Very nice to have a day like that compared to a client heavy week. I said this at the start of February, which is in a month, if they're say on average about 4 weeks, I mean, what insight, 4 weeks in a month roughly. So 4 weeks in a month, two of those at the moment for me are not quiet, but there's time to do things towards the business growth, etc. One will be busy enough with client work and one will be really busy with client sessions. The client session one just happened. So good week overall. Happy how it went. Very much a case now of building on things for clients next week. Not too many actions for clients specifically. There's a lot in motion for clients though, is what I would say, which is really interesting. So having worked with people now for between 3 to 6 months, there are quite a lot of moving pieces. So I think a lot of next week will be just checking in on progress, making sure everybody's on the same page, and then ultimately making sure they're chipping away at progress on the key things. So if your client listening to this, you know where my mind is in relation to what we're doing. So anyhow, what else has been coming up for me? I suppose there's a couple of ways I could go with this. I thought it might be nice, truthfully, just to share a bit of my story for between 5 and 10 minutes just now. I think I might do this at the end of the week, but for a few weeks in a row. So I'll start with a chunk or a specific piece of my background, and I'll just tell a story about it. And I think some people might find it interesting, some people might find it a bit dry. I don't know. But anyhow, I'm going to break up my, I suppose, career to date into different segments. And I do this because honestly, I don't think there's anything I've done yet that hasn't shaped or brought me to where I am today. And I think that's something that I don't want to, again, 5 years ago I'd have said that's so corny and so silly. But it's true, right? You do things in your own personal life and your career, and ultimately those things you do in some shape or some form contribute to where you are today, or have contributed to where you are today. So the specific piece I want to talk about was actually just the very first, long story short, my very first job was an unpaid internship. My very first job post education, full-time education, was an unpaid internship in London. So the backstory to how we got to that point even is I did a degree in finance and management at Strathclyde in Glasgow. Those 4 years were, for me personally, phenomenal. Academically, we did what we had to do, or I did what I had to do. I got the 2-1, so I mean, I don't even know who's listening to this in terms of where you're from or if you know what that means, but essentially it's probably a standard enough grade. A first is the top, so 2-1 is the next down. And yeah, all good and well. Did not have a clue what I was doing next. Hadn't even thought about it. So that gives you a layer of where my head is at that point. So at that point in my life, I had no idea what I was doing. Decided to do a postgrad in something that I'd always had an interest in, but had never really taken it seriously, which was journalism. So I did a postgrad in digital journalism at the same university. Great reputation for that course. Did it. And if it did one thing for me, it clarified that I will not be doing anything to do with journalism in my life. But it did at least give me a narrative, or give me a bit of an arc, in the sense of I'd done a business related course, I'd done now a journalism related course, and within it, because of the nature of the course, there was an element of digital marketing blended into that. And that was probably the one piece of it that I found most interesting. So from those 5 years, what I took, and it didn't take much beyond this, honestly, in terms of what I was going to do next, at least, I took that. There's a layer of business knowledge or acumen there, or interest for sure. I knew I wasn't going to go down the financial route or the banking route or whatever. And I had an interest in the marketing piece. So I moved home temporarily from Glasgow and started looking for opportunities. And I think one of the very early memories that sticks in my mind at this point in my life is having an absolute disaster of an interview for a job. It was, I think, the second job I got an interview for. It was a role in Belfast, and it was a role as a business analyst in an upcoming business based there. And it went horribly. It was an absolute shambles. And what I mean by that is I more or less wrote myself off in the middle of the interview by saying I wasn't a very analytical person, and I struggled on the number side at university when doing a finance course. So obviously when applying for a role of a business analyst in a relatively numbers-based business, it didn't really make sense to the people across the room or across the table from me. So I had a couple of interviews like that, and ultimately the recruiter who was trying to help me get a slot somewhere said, look, best bit of advice I can give you is get yourself on a plane to London. You will find an opportunity over there and you'll get started. So I did it. I didn't just do that, I started applying for some jobs in London, and ultimately had a couple of interesting Zoom calls or whatever it was. And yeah, I was looking on a site, I can't quite remember the site, but it was to do with startups. I thought it would be interesting to work for a small business. I felt I could maybe have more of an impact or whatever, but I wasn't tied up in that idea. I also realized that applying for these businesses that were like less than 50 people was a hell of a lot of quicker process than applying for like graduate schemes, which a lot of my friends had applied for and got into. And I also recognized that it was September 2015 and 2014, 2015 when my friends were applying for these, and they'd be applying for them for a year in advance. So I was looking for jobs with an immediate start date. Graduate schemes were not immediate start dates, basically. So yeah, I got an opportunity. Tech startup in the fitness space, based in London, unpaid internship. Was very great, very, very privileged to be able to take that opportunity, because you need some cash to live in London, and I had a bit of money, which was great. I got a bit of support there, which is something I'm very grateful for. But frankly, it wasn't a tremendous amount, but it was enough to do me a few months at least. And I did it with a view that I'll do this unpaid internship for 2 or 3 months, and in the meantime be looking for jobs. And that's more or less what I did. And that unpaid internship was brilliant, frankly. Brilliant for me. Got my foot in the door. I treated it like a game in some ways, in that I just wanted to be exceptionally good, like if there was a challenge. So there were a few other unpaid interns that joined at the same time. For me, it was really just a case of trying to stand out from the crowd, and I did that pretty well. I was actually offered a paid position then, and I didn't take it because, I'll be really honest, the amount they were trying to pay was incredibly low. More than zero, but still very low. And yeah, I decided, it wasn't going to be something I was going to do. Equally, around that same time, and this is where I'll maybe cut off and explain a couple of things. Around this time, a family member who lived in London or just outside London had an opportunity for me to help them out with their business, and I took it. So that was a paid position, again, entry level salary by all means, very entry level, but again, it was more an additional layer onto the CV. And I think why I wanted to say this was that 1 year window from finishing up my postgrad to being in both of those positions, transitioning into the second one in London, living in London on my own. I think for me that was the beginning of the growing up stage, really. I say growing up. People achieve tremendous success in their early 20s, even younger. I worked with someone that had achieved more by the age of 21, 22 than most people achieve by the time they're 40 or 50. That was the founder of the previous agency I worked for. And in my mind, when I look back, I can be quite dismissive of that year that I had. I can be quite self-critical of myself at university and how little I did, or how little I felt I did with my time. But equally, I look back at that period where I decided to do the unpaid internship and I took the attitude I did. And I'm really proud of it, because I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't done that specifically, because that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about managing your own finances, being sensible of the money you have. Again, I still speak from a very privileged position in that sense, but it really just exposed me to the wider world. Like, going to a city like London, frankly, it's quite terrifying in some ways. It's also really exciting, and it just helps you see what's out there in terms of opportunity. Certainly more so than it would have been if I'd stayed at home being somewhere like Derry or Belfast, so to speak. So yeah, in a nutshell, learning's there. It was a big first step for me, and ultimately it was the first stepping stone to get it to where I am today. So yeah, that's part one. We'll come back another Friday with maybe part 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever number it is, but I think that's enough for now. That takes us up to year 1 of my professional career. So giving you a bit of context as to who I am and where I've been. So anyhow, I'm going to wrap up a couple of bits quickly, and then that'll be me for this week. So I will speak to you next week, week 9 of the year.